criticizing the text, you understand. They have other purposes in the text. From our point of view of looking for evidence, what we want is literal statements which are precise enough to know what they mean and which we wouldn't otherwise expect to come true. Then, when they come true, they count as a significant prediction and significant evidence. Let's take a look. The conqueror will speak a language you don't understand. Anybody could be conquered by his neighbors. Just look at our neighbors trying to conquer us now. If you're conquered by your neighbor, that prediction will come out false. Neighboring countries spoke each other's languages. In our times, the time of the destruction of the Second Temple, had we been conquered by any Greek-speaking nation, the prediction would have been false. Many Jews spoke Greek. There was a sizable Greek culture here. Greek was the international language of the time. Had any Greek-speaking state conquered us, the prediction would have come out false. As it was, we were conquered by Rome, which spoke Latin, and there was no Latin culture here at the time. The conqueror will destroy the cities, the means of production, will slaughter population wantonly, men, women, and children, and will exile the population. This kind of utter destruction is very rare in the ancient world. The purpose of war is to defeat the army and tax the remaining population. You run an empire with money, and you get the money from taxing the people whom you defeat. The Romans, who ran all of Italy, North Africa, and east up to Persia, for 300 years, only destroyed a country twice, us and Carthage. No one else. The dozens and dozens of places they conquered. Their attitude was, we conquered the army, we defeated the army, and we'll tax the remaining population. So to predict this kind of wanton slaughter and destruction is a dangerous prediction. It's something which was very rare in the ancient world. Same thing's true with exile. You can't tax an exiled population. Exiled populations become beggars. The only reason you would exile is because you had no alternative. Then the text goes on that we'll be exiled, we'll end up all over the world. That also, the rare times that exile takes place, is very unusual. Why shouldn't people stay close to home? A place where they know the topography, they know the seasons, they know the economics, they know the agriculture. Why would a Jew from here end up in China or in Alaska or in Nigeria, where it's utterly foreign, utterly different, no natural allies? Indeed, didn't happen with anyone else. Then, if you're going to be scattered all over the world, how can you confidently predict that you're going to survive? Why should you survive? Indeed, if we have time before 30, I'll talk a little about Jewish survival. Jewish survival is unparalleled, unequaled, unapproximated by any other human experience. The prediction is one which is extremely unlikely to come true. Now let me stop to make a careful distinction. There are two ways of putting this point. From my point of view, one is right and one is wrong. I'm not now asking why would someone make such a stupid statement. There are lots of people who have made lots of stupid statements. We don't have to defend people's psychology, how intelligent they are, whether they would make such a prediction or wouldn't make such a prediction. I'm not in favor of reading people's psychology. You can't base an argument on that. I don't care why they made it. They may have had a dozen reasons why they wanted to make it, but it shouldn't have come true. My example is that a parent, an irresponsible parent, tells a child, if you steal a cookie from the cookie jar, the cookie monster will get you. Okay, there are irresponsible parents like that, but we don't expect it to happen. That if the child steals a cookie from the cookie jar, the cookie monster will really get him, do we? Don't expect that to happen. I don't care why someone would say you're going to be conquered and scattered and survive. I'm interested in why it should come true. There isn't the slightest reason whatsoever why it should come true. And if somehow, against all expectation, you're scattered all over the world, and you still manage to hang on and remain, how would you come back to the point of origin and recreate a presence there and a state? Nothing remotely resembling this has happened in the entire history of the world. That means this is a very risky prediction. Anyone at the time looking at the prediction would have to say this is the merest fantasy. No Buddhist, no Hindu, no Confucianist, no Greek philosopher, no believer in the mystery cults that were around at the time would give this the slightest credit. To him it would be just the merest fantasy. That's good. That's good. When you want to support your position, what you want is that you make a prediction and everybody else denied that it should come true. Then when it comes true, you have a piece of evidence that's for you and against everybody else. I call this selective evidence. What you really want in testing theories is selective evidence. This is an exquisite piece of selective evidence which was extremely unlikely to take place under any other point of view. And that being the case, it is direct evidence that the predictor of it, the prediction comes from a source which either knows the future or produces the future, one of the two. Yeah.
Maybe it's not that unlikely that, considering it's said in their Bible that the Jews would eventually return to Israel, they would return to Israel because, for 2,000 years, they're like, we're destined to eventually return to Israel, and then they'll do everything they can to try to do that. And I imagine there's nothing analogous to that in other religions.
Well, in part, I think you're begging the question at issue. Yes, if you had some reason to think that it would last for 2,000 of years, then you might go on to say that, in addition, it will come true. But there's no reason to think that it will last for 2,000 years. Believers in ancient religions believe their gods are real, and they're not going to go on AWOL. They're not going to go on vacation. And that means that their power is going to last forever, and it just disappeared. So all ancient cultures believed that their cultures were founded on a reality, and that didn't stop them from disappearing.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that. I'm not justifying why the Jewish culture wouldn't have disappeared. I'm just saying, assuming that it didn't disappear, it shouldn't be that surprising that we made it back to Israel.
Well, I think that is actually surprising. After all, what people, I think you're referring to, maybe I'm not reading you correctly, it's something called a self-fulfilling prophecy, where the person says, I can win the race. If he really believes it, then it gives him a much better chance of winning the race. That's true, especially if it's an amateur race. If the people are professionals, every one of them has convinced himself that he can win the race. That's why he's a good runner. And then he's running against people, all of whom have the same self-fulfilling prophecy, and not all of them can come true, because only one can win. Whether you credit self-fulfilling prophecy as an explanation depends upon whether independently you think that what the person believes can really happen. A person who believes with all his heart and soul that by flapping his arms hard enough he will fly, will not fly.
Yeah.
Because we know that it's not possible independently. Now, I look at human experience, I look at people's desire for their own countries and their own independence and so on and so on. And you're talking about a tiny scattered minority to come back after 2,000 years of absence to the place of origin. I suggest that since that has nothing resembling it in the entire history of mankind, probability of that is extremely low. To say that you can do it is to say you can do something which no one else has done, even approximately, which sounds like you're deluding yourself. At any rate, this prediction, if you take all of the elements of the prediction together, by the way, one other thing it says in the prediction is that the nation that will destroy will come from the ends of the earth. Now, the Romans defeated the Jewish armies 3 times. And only the third resulted in the destruction of the temple and the exile of the people. The Roman legions that defeated us on the 3rd time were the legions from Britain. They brought home the commander and the legions from Britain, and they were the ones who defeated us. That didn't have to happen. They had Roman legions all over. Indeed, the first 2 times, they weren't the legions from Britain. So you have here details which are literal enough and descriptive enough, and there's no reason to expect it to happen. It did take place. This is a direct piece of evidence. Yeah.
What about the other exiles?
Well, there's an interesting question here. I am assuming, although I don't think it's really an assumption, that the text was written before the exile took place. I think that's undeniable. at the time of the Roman conquest, you had Jews in Babylonia, Jews in the land of Israel, Jews in Alexandria, you even had Jews in Rome. You had Jews scattered throughout the region. They all had their scrolls. Now, I have to imagine a critic, even imagination boggles here, I have to imagine a critic who says, after the Roman conquest, all the scrolls were changed, identically, all over the world, and nobody noticed. And nobody protested. And there was no discussion of it. There wasn't even a conference of people getting together to verify the change. That's more incredible than the Exodus from Egypt. We're talking about less than 2,000 years ago. We're talking about a time for which we have myriad records. So that's something which I think is just totally incredible. You're asking about, let's say, the Babylonian exile. There, the critic will say that the account of the Torah, which at the end of Leviticus, which is written by the Babylonian exile, that was written later. I can't demonstrate that he's not right. That's why I don't use that particular exile. Because he'll say that the Torah's account was written after the events and reflects the events from post facto. Since I can't argue against that, there's no way for me to verify that, I don't use it. The facts do fit it, but I can't use it as a prediction. But here I know that it's a prediction, and I know that it was very unlikely to come true, and it did in fact come true, yeah.
Could you use the argument that the conquering nations might have read through this, and therefore had, could have potentially, if, I'm not saying they would necessarily want to use the ideas that were there, but we could have said maybe they read through it and were as a way of laughing at the Jewish people, decided to use those methods.
I can't imagine the Romans giving up a good source of revenue for the sake of a laugh. They were very practical people. If you can tax a population and you can make profit from them, for the sake of a laugh, they're not going to give that up. And in fact, as I said, in 300 years, they only did it twice. They did it to us and to Carthage and to nobody else. This was extremely, extremely rare. By the way, when you come across people who write about these matters, one fellow sent me a source that talked about the Assyrians. When the Assyrians conquered a nation, it says they carried out population replacement. So he said to me, the idea of exiling people was the policy of the Assyrian Empire to replace populations. Okay, that's a nice, vague way of putting it, but I looked up in the historical records of historians. Turns out that their policy was to take off the top 10% of the population. The leaders, the intelligentsia, the culture makers, the wealthy, and replace them with other leaders who would control the 90%. They didn't take away the whole population. They didn't do that. So it's, again, consistent with the idea that you want the workers to produce wealth, and you want to be able to tax the wealth. Now, I don't know if any of you will come across the following objection. Anybody here heard of Sir Karl Popper? Okay, just for the record, we're recording this. Popper's position is wrong in every respect, and a good place to see this is in Elliot Sober's book, Philosophy of Biology, where there's a whole section dedicated to Popper's position. But at any rate, I'll just tell you the gist of the idea and show you what's wrong with it briefly. Suppose someone said, look, this is an open-ended prediction. You said, if they fail badly enough, if they fail disastrously enough, doesn't that mean that you could never prove this prediction wrong? Suppose they never got conquered like this. What would you say? You would say, well, they didn't fail badly enough. That's why. Isn't it supposed to be part of a scientific method that when you make a prediction, it's got to be possible for the prediction to be proven wrong? This has been in all the creationism debates, and the judges have ruled in favor of this. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. It's poppycock. Every professional philosopher knows this and doesn't know whether to laugh or to cry when he reads these accounts of people, scientists who don't know philosophy and judges who don't know either, of this matter. I'll just give you a very simple example. I want you to meet my cousin George. My cousin George has a very special ability. When you flip a coin, if he concentrates on it hard enough, he can make it come up heads every time. You say, come on, I thought you were a reasonable person. You think he has that ability? I said, listen, try it out. Nothing to it. George comes in, sits down, take out your coin. George sits there,